All right. Good afternoon or good morning, everyone, depending on where you're joining us from today. I actually have it on pretty good authority that we have a nice spread of audience members from all over North America today. And as we're waiting for everyone to hop on the call and join in, let's just have a moment for everyone to say hi in the chat here. So if you want to, if you're so inclined, say hello with your name, maybe the institution that you're joining us from, and maybe what you're hoping to get out of today's session. And we can hopefully go through some of these and weave that into our conversation today. So we have a lot to discuss with our two panelists today. We have Maureen, who's already joined us on the call. We have Ruben as well, who may be joining us in just some due time. But there's a lot to get into. And today's topic is all about course level strategies for work integrated learning and project-based learning. And this is a topic that's really near and dear to Ripen's heart as a company that really lives and breathes work integrated learning and project-based learning. So as people are still coming in, I'll just quickly remind you of Ripen. If you're not already familiar with Ripen, we're a company that's on a mission to eliminate graduate underemployment. And we do this through our technology platform, and it helps facilitate connections between employers and educators to host work integrated learning projects for students. Yes, we are a marketplace, but we're much more than that. We also have built-in tools for project management, making sure that students and employers can actually complete those projects online. And at the same time, we give a lot of great tools for educators to help monitor the progress and the status of those projects. And we also really enable comprehensive data and impact reporting. And in fact, more and more schools that we work with are using Ripen as their database for all things project-based learning related. As a cherry on top, a little extra bonus, students also get a really nice experiential learning record of all of the activities they've completed on Ripen, along with the skills that they've developed and a certificate of the project they've completed that they can share to LinkedIn. So that's a really quick overview of Ripen for those who are uninitiated. Hi, Ruben. Ruben is here now, so that's great. Okay, so my name is Jason Pang. I'm a partner relationships manager here at Ripen, and I have the pleasure of moderating today's conversation.
Hello, hello, hello. Can you hear me?
Hi, Ruben. We can hear you great. Anyways, I have a great pleasure of moderating today's conversation with two esteemed panelists who are joining us today, professors at their respective institutions who have been really great champions of work integrated learning and have lots of experience and lots of wisdom to impart and share on today's topic. So we have Marie McCoy, teaching professor within the College of Health Solutions at Arizona State University, or ASU. And we have Ruben Berga, assistant professor with the Gordon S. Lang School of Business and Economics at the University of Guelph, who might be experiencing some technical issues right here. I'm sure we'll help him sort that out. There he is. Hi, Ruben. At least we can see you now, which is great. And hopefully the audio is going to be working sometime soon. But I do have an educator spotlight slide that I would love for Maureen and Ruben to have some time to introduce themselves a little bit more fully. So Maureen, I'll pass the mic to you, and I'll invite you to briefly let us know about some of the work that you do, your experience in work integrated learning. And we can already see here that you've connected students with over 60 employers on Ripen so far. So I'll give you the mic, Maureen.
Good morning, everyone. Well, it's morning in Arizona anyway. Good afternoon. I'm super excited to share my experiences with Ripen today. It's been a really fantastic tool for me. I've been using it since 2020, so about 5 years of using Ripen. At Arizona State University, we have a very large online portion to what we do, and lots of online students who also struggled in the past finding experiential learning, work experience. Sometimes they live overseas. Sometimes they live in really small communities where it's hard to find opportunities sometimes. So when this opportunity was presented to me at ASU, we have a large kind of sandbox of opportunities that we get to choose from as instructors to decide what works best in our courses. So when Ripen was first introduced as kind of this opportunity for students to get work integrated learning, I jumped right on board. I'm like, I will trial this. I will give this a shot. I will see what happens. Jumped right in, started searching for things. So the course that I have typically used it in is a capstone 400 level undergraduate online course. Most of the students are third, fourth year, so nearing graduation. I teach in nutrition. Not that that matters. It works for all different backgrounds. Um, so I was able to find some really fantastic opportunities that the students would never have had before having a tool like this. In the early stages of Ripen, it was very much Canadian-based companies, which was also fine. In the space of food and nutrition, though, it was kind of interesting because the food laws and labels and trying to bring a new food product from Canada to the US, like it was a whole new world for some myself and my students. But now there's a lot of US-based companies as well. So it really kind of crosses all different platforms, but gives students a really fantastic experience regardless of where they are. So being able to connect students with so many different opportunities that they would never have the chance to connect with before has really been the highlight of using Ripen for me.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for that introduction, Maureen. Ruben, I'm going to pass you the mic here now, along with your slide in the spotlight here. And I know you're a huge champion of working in graded learning, and you've impacted over 1,400 students. So please share with us some of your experience.
Yes, thank you, and welcome to everybody at the University of Guelph. I am in the School of Business and Economics, the Lang School of Business and Economics, and we believe very strongly in experiential learning and in work integrated learning. So since I started using this kind of a platform, Ripen, over COVID, I've exposed this to over 1,400, maybe 1,500 students in different chunks. So if you're not very experienced with it, you may want to try it out with half the class, which is what I started my very first experience, where I only had, I believe, a couple of hundred students and only half a dozen clients. But then once I became comfortable with it and the students became comfortable, I use it throughout entire classroom. So my example is with large undergraduate classes. So the size of the classes are anywhere from 300 to 500 students, who then are broken up into groups. So I have anywhere from 50 to 80 groups. And then each client gets anywhere from 3 to 5 groups to work on their project. And this becomes a real semester-long experiential activity. It exposes the students to different kinds of environments. They get a chance to present a report to their clients and ultimately have presentations at the end that showcase what they've learned. That's just at the undergraduate, but I also use it at the graduate level. So I have a smaller project management class, about 40 students or so, broken up into little groups of 3 or 4. And then I assign 2 to 3 groups per client to do project-based work integrated learning, which again, the clients really appreciate. And moving on from that, I can also select different projects. So in my latest installment, I had a group of 50 master students working on innovation commercialization on projects that the clients on Ripen were very anxiously looking towards support on commercializing their ideas. And these students, this is what they've been trained to do. And this provides amazing experience for the client and amazing experience for the students. So overall, with all the employers I've worked with and with all the students, the experience has been really experiential in every possible way, and also very much a work integrated learning experience. Hope that addresses it, Jason.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for both of you. And I know there's a lot of already topics there that we're foreshadowing for future discussion in the webinar. So I'm really excited to get there. For now, let's cover the agenda today. So again, we have a jam-packed agenda. We've led with some of the introductions already. The next part, I'll just summarize really briefly what it is that we mean when we talk about work integrated learning and why it's so important today. Then we'll move into 3 separate segments here: understanding the experiential learning toolbox, best practices for embedding work integrated learning into courses, some of which Ruben has already brought up, and finally, course design versus program design. So we're going to have 15 minutes after all of that for Q&A, where I would love the audience's participation. So at any point throughout the webinar, if you have a question, use the Q&A feature within Zoom. That's where we'll be focusing our attention when we're kind of collecting some of the questions at the end there. And we'll bring those up and have some time for you to ask Maureen and Ruben. So with that being said, let's move on directly into what is work integrated learning. You know, this is a really great graphic that's borrowed from our friends at WIL Canada. It's a great breakdown of the different forms of experiential learning and work integrated learning, which, by the way, also includes co-curricular, extracurricular things as well, like student clubs on campus, volunteer experiences. Those can be considered experiential learning as well. But really, experiential learning, and many of you know this already, is an umbrella term, and it captures a lot of many activities meant to provide students with hands-on applied learning that helps bridge theory to practice. A very key branch of experiential learning is work integrated learning, and that adds an additional dimension, which is an industry partnership, right? So work integrated learning truly exposes students to authentic real-world challenges that occur within a workplace setting, which is the crucial component, right? So through work integrated activities like capstones, service learning, internships, students are able to actually develop really valuable employability skills. And they can actually begin to see how their learning extends beyond the classroom walls and actually starts connecting to different career paths. So that's the importance of it as well. In today's employability landscape, work integrated learning is critical. And it's no secret that students want to attend an institution or an academic program that is going to help them land a good paying, secure job. We've heard this from many of our partners and consultants. Brainstorm Strategy Group, which is a group here in Canada, they put out an annual survey to students across Canada every year. One of the key questions they ask is, why did you choose to attend university and college? And the number one and number two responses in 2024 have been to prepare for a job and to increase my earning potential. So we know this is top of mind for students. Employers, you know, we think about employers too. They view relevant work experience through internships and through other forms of work integrated learning as extremely beneficial during their hiring decisions, right? WIL provides authentic and applied learning opportunities that help students develop the skills that employers need today and tomorrow. And you can see here are some WIL outcomes. These are statistics that are taken out of Ripen's Level Up program. And that program is really providing students with, you know, shorter term projects with partners and employers, and they receive a small stipend at the end of it. But we're able to collect really rich data from this program. And you can see students are finding that these experiences, these work integrated learning experiences, are crucial in developing their professional skills and in helping them transition to a career. So I have a couple of questions for the panel here then. Maureen and Ruben, what are some of the WIL outcomes that have been maybe key reasons for why you've chosen to include work integrated learning in your courses? And you can consider these for, you know, students, but also for employers. What sort of outcomes are employers interested in?
I guess I can go first, Maureen. Okay. So it's really interesting because at the start of the experience, the students really don't know what they're getting into. But as they go through it, they get this epiphany that what they are doing makes a difference. And in experiential learning and work integrated learning, a lot of times what you're trying to convince the students is that this actually matters. So then it becomes more of a deep learning situation. The clients themselves gets exposed to the type of students that we have. And in many cases, it can give them an opinion of the kinds of students they would like to hire. It gives them a more refined idea whether their project, idea, or whatever it happens to be, needs to be refined a little bit more, solutionized, projectized, whatever it happens to be. So there's huge advantages on both sides, to the students and to the employers. And then Maureen, I think, can add some more to this.
Yeah, I think some of the outcomes that we've seen is a big increase in professionalism over the course of the experience. A lot of our students, even though, you know, they've kind of reached this capstone end point, the professionalism is still somewhat lacking. They're used to just sending their professors just a, hey, got up late, sending this assignment in late, like very, you know, short to the point, very text style, right, in communication. So just really seeing that growth has been really exciting. Like the students are being asked to even sit in on like team meetings with the company, and they really feel like they're part of something and it matters. Like Ruben was saying, like, I think sometimes if the students didn't see their project being used at the end of the experience, that really kind of hit them. They're like, I worked so hard, like I really wanted to see it being used. But when it is a really cohesive environment, both on the employer side and the student side, and they get to see how their work is being used, like it really kind of quadrupled, like exponentially, how much the student felt invested in what they were doing, which was really nice to see. And that the students can kind of realize that they actually do know things about their content area that they can share with someone else who maybe doesn't know. So I think it gave them some of that confidence too, that like I've actually learned a lot over the past few years, and I can put that to practice and help other people with that. So just big increases in confidence and professionalism was a great outcome.
Yeah, I think confidence is so key. And you know, back when I used to work in post-secondary helping co-op students, you can really see that progress and transformation in students' confidence. A student who's going out for their first co-op work term, you know, they lack a lot of confidence. They don't really know how to talk about their experience or talk about their skills. But after they finish their final co-op term and they're ready to cross the stage for graduation, you can just see that shift, and they're ready now to go out and apply for jobs. And they have a lot of examples they can talk about during their interviews and in their applications. So that is a really critical, I think, outcome for WIL. Moving forward, though, as a trusted partner in facilitating a lot of work integrated learning, you know, we've helped over 11,000 educators. We've enabled now, you know, this number actually 272 learner experiences is a bit outdated. We're approaching 300,000 experiences we've helped enable. That's a lot of impact for students. And this is just a very quick snapshot of just some of the academic partners from across Canada and the US. And, you know, very proud University of Guelph is on there as well as ASU. And we can't even begin to fit the 44,000 employers that we work with. But suffice to say, though, that we have a lot of experience in work integrated learning. But we also know that it can be challenging, right? It can be really tough to integrate and embed work integrated learning into a course or into a program. So we want to be a partner here at Ripen to support educators across the life cycle of a WIL project, from the design of it to matching it with the right partner, with the right project, and collecting feedback and impact measurement. So what we've done is we've taken all of that experience we've accumulated and we've broken down the steps of how to intentionally and thoughtfully include a work integrated learning experience in a course. And this is to help provide guidance for other educators. We call these Ripen moments. One thing that's really important, though, when it comes to WIL is how there are different stakeholders involved, right? We have educators, we have students, we have employers, and it's really critical to understand how they fit into each of these steps along the way in the life cycle of a work integrated learning experience. So for example, you know, we can start thinking about when we're designing the experience, this is where educators and employers have to work with each other to scope out the project and negotiate the expectations and deliverables. When we're thinking about engaging the learner in reflection, we have to consider the students might need prompts, they might need guidance to help their self-reflection. So is this coming from the educator? Is this coming from the supervisor or the employer? When we're supporting students in terms of integrating their self-reflection and integrating their learnings, are there opportunities within the experience for students to challenge or to revise their existing knowledge frameworks? And then are we giving them opportunities to experiment with this new knowledge that they're gaining or the new skills that they're gaining? Is there a safe space within the experience for students to fail and then to learn from that failure? And are we connecting those students to opportunities beyond just the work integrated learning activity on campus, let's say with our career services or with student clubs on campus? These are all really important questions that we have to consider and ask ourselves in this whole design and lead up to an experience. So this leads to another question. Both of you have really extensive experience going through these steps to create a work integrated learning opportunity. Some of the steps take a lot of time, course planning, project sourcing, even assessment at the very end of an experience. Are there steps here that you would prepare or caution new educators to ensure that they have, a smooth and successful work integrated learning experience?
I think in the early days of me trying to do this, and my classes are a bit smaller than what Ruben described on the undergrad side. I didn't have massively large classes, so I didn't need as many perhaps projects, but I would have individual phone calls with every company that I was planning on working with. They would go for sometimes an hour if the company really wanted to tell me all about themselves. And it was really interesting. It's like, oh gosh, this is fascinating. But then also me describing who our learners were, making sure that we came to a project that made sense. Again, we don't want the students to fail. We want it to be reasonable within the experiences that they've had. So I think I felt I have trouble letting go of the reins. I wanted to control the whole situation, and I never wanted the students to feel any like pain points or anything. So I think I made it more painful for myself than I needed to in those early days. But like Jason said, Ripen has been very open to feedback this entire process. So throughout the 5 years, I've really seen the platform change a lot in terms of what the instructor can enter. In the early stages of setting up your course in Ripen, you really can spell out who your learner is, what types of projects you're looking for, what type of check-ins you want from the employer, and really trying to make sure that you're putting forward like what your expectations are, so you can really find a nice strong match. So then the way I did it, which again, my controlling ways, I would go in before the semester starts. I would find all the potential projects. I would list them out on a spreadsheet. I'd have the students rank them all, and then I would place them. Instead of the smarter way, the more scalable way is to let Ripen kind of do those steps for you and put more power in the students' hands to choose the project that they think is the best match, and kind of first come, first serve based off of the projects that you've kind of gathered that you think are a good match. So really, I think Ripen now the software itself has expanded so much to really make the process easier for the instructor to make it a more scalable process.
So just to follow up with what Maureen said, the hard part, I think, for all of us is always developing curriculum. Similarly, consider this part of your development. The prepping, the logistics is the part that takes a little bit of time, but really not as much as it used to. It's really, because I've seen it from about 5-6 years back to now, it's incredibly helpful to see how it's actually evolved, in that if I put in all the right terms and the right description of the course or experience that I have, then there's an automatic AI bot that matches the most likely companies to match with the experience. And that takes out a lot of the guessing and provides you with companies that are most appropriate. And then I would do the same thing Maureen does. I would definitely have a first call just to match expectations of the employer with expectations of the students, and vice versa, to let them know this is a third-year class or this is a graduate class, just to set the expectation and the tone so that they know what to expect as an 8-week project, a 12-week project, or a 4-week project. So everybody knows what to expect, and at the end, in almost all cases, it's been a fairly positive experience. So thanks a lot.
Absolutely. I think that's a really important point. Like, oftentimes when we do these remote or virtual projects, some employers, even some educators, consider it to be a bit more automated, right? But it really still involves a lot of time speaking with the employer partner to really scope out the expectations and make sure that they're aligned and they understand what role they're playing still, right? Just as, if it was an in-person experience, you would do the same thing. So I think that's a really critical piece for people to understand as well. Thank you for that. Okay, we're going to jump into the first segment right here, which is understanding the experiential learning toolbox, right? And so when we think about experiential learning, you have to use the right tool for the right job. Just like, we use different tools around the house to get things done, a knife for cutting, a hammer for hammering. We have different forms of experiential learning and work integrated learning that are available to us, like simulations, capstones, internships. But each of them serve very different learning goals, or they engage students in a very different way. And we can maybe evaluate their use cases by things like the degrees of authenticity, the assessment value that they provide, the scalability of that form of work integrated learning, and the impact to the learner. And when we talk about authenticity, is that learning environment controlled or contrived, or is it embedded in a real environment where students face ambiguity, where it gives students an opportunity to practice autonomy in responding to uncertainty and using their critical thinking skills, analyzing imperfect information. Oftentimes in case studies, all the information is given, it's perfect, but that's not what happens in the real world, right? And students need to engage in that critical thinking and decision making. When we talk about assessment, assessment can be used for so many different purposes. We can have formative assessment, which helps to build in some scaffolding to build students up by providing feedback at each stage of that assessment. We can have diagnostic forms of assessment, right? Helping to identify what areas students need to continue developing in. We can have summative assessment where it happens at the end of the instruction. We can see what students have learned thus far and use that as benchmarking. So some educational tools might only serve a singular rigid purpose, right? The example I reach for is a multiple choice question on a quiz. It's very rigid. It's for one purpose only. Experiential learning, on the other hand, is a lot more dynamic. It's a lot more adaptive. It's helping students be more engaged and learn in a way that's a bit more practical and authentic again. So this begs the question, though, when should we use a specific form of experiential learning or work integrated learning? So back to the panel here, we talked about experiential learning as a toolbox. How have you decided what tools to use in your courses? What is that decision-making process like for both of you?
Okay, I'll start my turn now. So depending on the class itself, I've used, for example, research projects as a sandbox for my students to practice working as a team, getting to specific objectives. And then once that research project, that sandbox idea is over, then I switch them to real life, ripen experiential work integrated learning. So in their sandbox, they learn the do's and don'ts, but still very constrained, but allows them to fail often, fail fast, the old mantra of entrepreneurship, so that by the time they get to the work integrated learning, they actually take on the task and are more successful in applying what they've learned in the lessons from their capstone. So so that's an example of how I've done that. I think Maureen had some other ideas too.
Yeah, I think it's been so tough lately with AI, and when we think about a case study, and I see students that just plug it in and then plug the answer in, and like we're having to be, in a positive way, much more creative with the way that we're trying to teach students, because they will always have AI at their fingertips. So how can we still add in that additional component of life that they actually need? And that's experiential learning. We've been trying to talk lately, just like within my college at ASU, how can we integrate small versions of more experiential learning through the 100, the 200, the 300, the 400. I think Ruben, at your school, I think you had noted that that was kind of part of your curriculum. I think that that's something that we're trying to start a little bit more of and try to tell professors at every level. Like, there's very small ways that you can just get students used to those little bits of work integrated learning, experiential learning. So by the time they get to the 400 level, it's not like, oh gosh, what is this? Like, I have to talk to actual people. I can't just, record a Zoom presentation to no one and then be done. Like, check that box. So I think it's important, as we consider what our course design looks like, how can we start to integrate that at every single level of our curriculum? Because again, like, a case study is great and simulations are great, but they're only going to get us so far. So I think finding that creative way to get it in at every level.
Absolutely. Ruben, I saw that you unmuted. I know you wanted to add something there.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in because what Maureen said was really interesting. AI can be a competitor, an adversary, or you can work with it. So we're embracing that the students use AI to help with some of their marketing studies and so forth. But the critical thinking is still there because they have to communicate with their client. They learn professional skills. They have to learn to communicate, to solve a problem, and then get a real-time answer from a real-time person as to whether their solution actually made sense. AI can't really give you that. So this is the part I just want to add. Thank you, Jason.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I fully agree with that. I think we should probably find ways to allow students to use AI in ways that are productive and creative. And I've always, I forget where I heard this, but it's the idea that there's this constant debate between what's more productive, a person or an AI, right? And we can have that debate forever. But the real question is it more productive for a person with AI, versus a person without AI? And I think it's always going to be more productive with AI, right? But you're not letting go of that individual, that humanistic approach too. And back to forms of assessment when it comes to AI, one of the ways that a lot of educators are talking about combating AI is to find authentic types of assessments, right? And experiential learning, work integrated learning, is as authentic as you can get. And so I think the more that we kind of open our arms to it and include it in our curriculum, the better it is for everyone. Educators in terms of assessment, for seeing what students are truly learning, but also for students as well. Okay, excellent. Thank you for that. So moving on to segment 2 then. Best practices for embedding WIL into courses. Embedding WIL into a course is not without its challenges. It can be a lot of additional administrative work. Maureen and Ruben both talked about how much work it actually takes before we had this technology available to scale it, right? It takes a lot of work to secure partnerships. It takes a lot of work to develop those projects that challenge students with the right level of difficulty, but also simultaneously allows them to be successful. We want to push them to the edge of their learning, but not to overwhelm them. But you have to manage expectations for both the students and the partners and ensure that the work is delivered on time, because there typically is a deadline and a timeline associated with this, right? Sometimes the WIL activity can be just a portion of a course, and other times it can be the entire course itself, right? As the case with a capstone or with an internship. But there are some best practices that we can consider for embedding WIL into our courses. So these are some of them. We have to be mindful that not every course is going to be the right fit for experiential learning or work integrated learning. It might not be practical to include work integrated learning for a course that is pure mathematics, for example, where the theory is really abstract and there's an insufficient amount of real-world applications to be able to host a student, right? That might not be a great fit. We have to consider, is there a certain amount of right sizing that we have to do to the course content? Is everything in that course essential, or would it be more meaningful to engage students in a form of experiential learning to apply some of the key course learning outcomes? Mapping learning outcomes. Can some of the learning outcomes be strengthened through a form of experiential learning or work integrated learning? Do you have to provide students with some sort of preparation? Consider, is there a formal work integrated learning preparation class? Things like we used to have co-op education prep classes before the actual work terms. Is there a detailed rubric for capstone project deliverables that students can see ahead of time? Will you allow for some in-class time to work on maybe a short consulting project for a client? These are all questions that we have to ask when it comes to providing students with support. And then, like Ruben had mentioned, start small and ease into work integrated learning. Maybe only do it with half the class and see how that goes as a pilot before you really implement it in a full course. So back to the panel with some additional questions here. Have there been a case where you've actually had to scale back maybe the original course content? And how do you decide on that? What did you scale back to make room for work integrated learning?
I try not to scale back in the middle of a semester, obviously. Any scaling should hopefully happen before, so the students aren't confused. Not that they would be sad if you cut something. They would probably be very happy about that, and maybe your eval scores would go up. But I think, like, I've always really tried to look at the context. I mean, at this point, I think the capstone is kind of like the easiest version of when to incorporate something like this, because they should have had all those classes to kind of prep them to then be able to share the information that they need to share. So I do tend to cut, discussion boards and things like that, instead move those into something like a monthly reflection and a midterm check-in point with their project, with their internship. So I think it's more of kind of a modification of the types of things that maybe you would typically do. My class, it's kind of career prep and careers in nutrition. So we work with career services, and they're practicing their interviewing skills, and they're doing their resume and creating a LinkedIn profile that then we encourage them to upload any projects that they've created with their Ripen into their LinkedIn. And just so it all kind of fits together, because it is essentially job prep at this point. But Ripen also has smaller projects that maybe don't take the entire semester. Maybe it's just, they'll say on the project description, maybe this is just a 10-hour project. And that's something I think that you could maybe more easily in a smaller way integrate that into your course. But I do start talking about it at the very start of the semester, so it's like already in their brain, like, oh, this is coming, this is coming, this is what I'm working on, this is what we're working towards. So it's always kind of that constant, like, there's no surprises as we're going along, and I think that helps them prepare as well.
So in terms of scaling, I've used work integrated learning through Ripen for a 4-week intensive project. And again, both the students and the client know it's 4 weeks. And for a 6 to 7 week midterm project, and then for a semester long, 10 weeks roughly out of a 12 to 14 week semester project. But in all cases, what I did was replace the existing simulation or existing in-class project with the work integrated learning, which goes back to the pilot phase. Because I wasn't sure about it 5 years, 6 years ago, I decided to pilot, and I had half the class doing the standard team assignment, and the other half was doing the work integrated learning through Ripen, so I could learn the ropes, see what worked, what didn't work. And in the end, I got the feedback from the students. Then the following semester, I went ahead and used it fully. So in terms of scaling, as Maureen says, you can't really scale throughout the semester, but before the semester, if you are intentional about deciding this will replace a particular segment that took 20, 30% of the grades, whatever happens to be the team-based segment, fantastic. It works in very nicely.
Yeah, I think that's a really great approach to use, and it's quite low risk. It's just replacing an existing assignment with something that is a bit more applied and more hands-on, and might actually incorporate some external party to make it work integrated learning. That's a really great tactic, I think, to use. Moving on, I'm mindful of time here, so I do want to make sure that we have 15 minutes still for Q&A, but I'll move on to one of the last few slides here, maybe, that we'll go through, is considering the different forms of work integrated learning. We have a lot of forms that we can choose from, going back to that toolbox analogy. And because these different forms of work integrated learning serve different learning goals for our diverse students, it's important to consider when we might want to use these different forms, right? And we can start thinking about design considerations like the scope or the complexity of the challenge being aligned to the student capabilities. We might have very junior students in year one, for instance, that we're trying to design for. Or we might have students who've gone through the entirety of the program and they're thinking about the culminating experience to weave in all of the different courses and topics they've learned in a capstone project. So those are going to look very different. We also have to consider what are the roles and expectations of the different participants, the students, the educators, and the employer. Is there going to be a certain amount of mentorship or supervision that the employer has to provide? And do they understand that? Or are they going to be more hands-off at an arm's length distance away? Do they not want to be approached by students, right? Those are the type of questions we have to ask as well. Are students going to be working individually, or are they going to be in teams? I think that creates another dynamic that we have to be concerned about and think through. Are the students going to apply for the projects so they have a choice in the matter? Or are they going to be assigned by the educator? And again, that'll create different team dynamics as well. Is there enough time allowed for the project? Are we being mindful? Are we being very clear? Are we being practical with that as well, realistic? And are there clear deliverables? Is it a project that is going to be process-based? For instance, students might have to do weekly journal entries. Or is there actually a product at the end of it that students have to create and produce, whether that's a presentation, a paper, or even a prototype, right? So back to the panel then. Do you co-design your projects with the employers or the partners that you work with, or do you typically provide them with a template or a rubric to follow?
I have some learning outcomes that I want to address. So I typically look at what the project is, and within those parameters, I say I'd like to make sure the students do learn something about marketing strategy, about the conditions, the macro or micro organizational conditions. So the client knows they don't have to be pedagogical experts, but they know that there are certain things the students have to try and get out of it. And I make sure that what they're trying to get out of it is stuff that the client actually wants to have within their project. So whether it's project-based, capstone, or internship, those elements are always consistent for me. Maureen?
Yeah, I would say very similar. When I speak to the client on their profile will put what they want the deliverable to be by the end of it. And there's a little back and forth with that usually. When you have that conversation with them, it becomes like, here's what my students have background in. And then sometimes like the deliverable might change a little bit from what the client originally thought. And they're like, oh, well, this actually, maybe they could do this and this and this. So that's where those conversations can be so helpful, but definitely a co-design type process just to make sure that we're getting them what they want. And then the students are also clear and we're being clear with our deliverables.
That's fantastic. I'm going to prime some of the audience members to maybe put in their questions in the Q&A, and we'll have time to maybe go through section 3 very quickly as they do that so that we have the questions ready to go. Segment 3 is really about course design and program design, right? So we know that there are challenges to overcome in work integrated learning, but we also know that the benefits are worth it, right? The benefits are worth the work that we put in. But depending on your role at the institution, whether you're an educator or maybe you're an executive leader, there are going to be different sets of challenges and opportunities that you might face, right? So, if, for instance, the school is rolling out a new academic plan, that's coming from the top down, and it represents really long-term alignment. There's a certain amount of scalability involved and sustainability. It might take a long time to implement something as large as an academic plan. But if you as an individual educator are learning from industry partners that perhaps your students aren't being prepared as well as they would like, or there's a skills deficit, then you as an educator have that autonomy to maybe implement some forms of work integrated learning to address that skills gap, right? So those are certain things to be mindful of as well. And here, this is the last slide before we get into Q&A. We also know that there are a lot of institutional supports that can be offered for educators to implement work integrated learning, either at the course level or even at the program level. Consider the fact that a lot of schools nowadays really want to scaffold forms of WIL throughout the program, starting with small short-term projects, maybe in year 1 for junior students, all the way to service learning for year 2, year 3, where a project is not quite the entire length of the course, but they do integrate students with a community partner, maybe a not-for-profit, to do some sort of work with them. And then all the way to the final culminating capstone or internship, where things can be an entire course, or, with the case of internships and co-ops, it could be consecutive terms for up to a year or 16 months, as in the case with co-op. So these are all things to keep in mind as well. I'll start off with the Q&A with one question, and then we'll go to the audience members. But it's not always sunshine and rainbows in the world of work integrated learning. There are barriers to integrating work integrated learning. Some of them might even be institutional barriers. So my question is, what challenges or maybe points of friction have you had to overcome to move forward with work integrated learning, and how did you overcome it?
One of the challenges is having this type of integrated learning recognized by the rest of your college, your department, wherever you happen to work in. And one of the ways to address that is to actually get the student voices in there. If the students provide feedback that says this was an amazing opportunity, experience, and so forth, feed that right back to your chair, dean, whatever, whoever's the admin side of course program planning, because ultimately we're trying to do this for the growth of our students. It's the students' voices that matter. And if the students are saying that this is great for them, that's ultimately the voice that's going to be counting more than your own voice. So I think that's one of the ways.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea that our college is very active on social media. So really even highlighting those stories and those experiences that the students are having, I think is such a cool way to do it. I haven't really experienced any pushback. ASU, someone at Ripon described it as ASU has an agnostic toolbox, meaning that we're given like a whole host of resources and the instructor can decide what they think is best. And they're always putting new things out there, which is good. But it takes some time to learn each one and make sure like it's a good fit for your class or not. Sometimes I tend to jump into things because I want to try all the cool tools, but it's like you can't put all the tools in one class. Like your toolbox can get too cluttered. So I think just being very, choosy with what you want to integrate into your course. But I hope that the school sees it as a win. I mean, we want our students to be work ready. Like this is the goal of education. And I think those conversations are even getting louder and stronger with AI in the picture, right? Like we need to be able to show that we're teaching those soft skills, that we are really preparing these students to connect with humans. And as Ruben and Jason said, like use AI as part of our toolbox, but how can these students actually make a difference in the world? And that's what we're trying to do here.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you for that. Okay, so we're going to jump into Q&A right now. I do have some questions here already primed. The first one being, and this might be something we already chatted about, but how do you manage employer expectations in terms of the quality of the work that students produce, right? What are some of the ways that you tackle that and align those expectations?
I have the clients, so the Ripon client will do a midpoint evaluation and an end of the semester evaluation, and that evaluation is tied to their grade. So if the employer, the client does not think that the student created something that's usable and they didn't stay on task and they didn't, do all the objectives that we originally set out, then that is a knock on their grade.
Great. Ruben, anything to add to that one in terms of aligning expectations with employers?
Not really. I really support what Maureen says. The upfront work of talking to the employer to make sure expectations are set at the very start And then again, talking to your class to make sure expectations on their side are also set. I think those two are key things. If you can do that, then things will work out.
Yeah, I'll add my 2 cents too. I think a lot of employers are willing to work with students, and typically these are projects that, in the case with a course-based project, they're unpaid, right? And so employers understand that they're playing the role of an educator as well for these students, right? This is a teaching opportunity for them as much as it is an opportunity to actually get some really useful and beneficial things for their company. But at the end of the day, it's really giving that opportunity to students to learn from. So a lot of educators already understand that, and so that alignment should already be there. And those are the educators, sorry, those are the employers and the partners that you really want to work with because they get it. They get what the value. Um, I have as well. It might be something that might be harder for us to answer because I don't think either of us really work in the college, sector. But what are some best practices for using experiential learning and work integrating learning at the community college level, or maybe in your cases for really junior students in year 1 or maybe in year 2? Have you implemented that for students at that stage of their program yet?
I'm going to answer it from the viewpoint of I've taught at a community college level before. And one of the missions within those levels is vocational strength. We're there to teach them to be successful at vocationally, whatever the discipline is. I could see it being used at the community college level to match students with work integrated experience that are similar to what they are trying to learn to do, whether it is in marketing, sales, nursing, whatever it happens to be. So I can see it being used because I'm at the university level. And this was way before Ripen existed. I'm not too sure whether there's a lot of uptick with the community college level, but I would see it as a very useful tool.
Amazing. Marina, anything to add to that one?
No, I think that's a fantastic answer. The only other thing that came to my mind is, I mean, I teach a community nutrition class, and the students always do volunteer work and really, doing something in their community that again connects to what they hope to do, or maybe it doesn't fully connect, but I think that's always a nice way to start too.
Absolutely. We talked a little bit earlier about student supports, right? And some preparation for students who might not have had an experiential learning opportunity before. So one of the questions is, what topics do you cover typically in some sort of preparation for students before they go into a work integrated learning project?
I think I want to address this because there's also another question that might be relevant in there concerning Canadian students in, let's say, with US companies. Ripen being global allows work from clients from all over the world. So I've had clients from all over the world, located in France, in the US, and Canada. And one of the first things is that you already know who the client is. So you know that there may be some cultural considerations or political considerations that you have to address. And that's how you can prep the students at the very start. And I always prep by saying, look, this is a small world. You could be working anywhere in the world. So you might as well learn some of the regulations, constraints, things you can talk about. And as long as the other side, whoever the client is from anywhere in the world, tells you, listen, these are little sensitive topics over here, just be aware, then that's fine. I let the students know that they're aware and we work through. I haven't had a problem yet, thank God. And I don't believe I will have a problem as long as everybody knows how the situation is played out.
Great.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think we do a little bit on professionalism and how to send a professional email, timeliness of responses, but for the class, like there's not a lot of time for that. It's like we gotta jump into it and get them going on those hours. So I have them work on like their LinkedIn profile before they start so they can share that with the employer as well, just to kind of present that up front. But yeah, sometimes we just hope that some of what you've done in those early first few classes is gonna kind of, seep into what they do with the course you're doing.
Absolutely. Fantastic. I have one more question here before I share my screen again with just the takeaways from today's session. But in terms of student equity, inclusivity, and accessibility, a lot of our students, they're not always at the same stage, right? You have some students who might never have had a job before. You have some students who have a ton of experience. What are some ways that you ensure that all students feel comfortable when going into a work integrated learning experience if they haven't had, a similar experience before that?
What a good question. You, this is really going back to team formation, right? They're in the storming stage. They try and find out who they are, and they try and learn how to work together. There are some students who are definitely more advanced. There are some not so advanced. So then during the group formation, they write a group contract. They try to understand again, like Maureen has talked about, who they are from the LinkedIn profiles or their experience level. And yes, part of your job as an instructor is to reach out and provide the support as needed. You can see some of them struggle and some of them don't struggle. So I'm sure Maureen does the same thing. I have a midterm kind of report so I can see where are they? Are they moving along? And then who are the social loafers? And they're loafing because of challenges or because intentionally trying to loaf. So in my experience, very few are intentionally loafing. There's always something going on in the background.
Yeah, I think trying to catch those issues sooner than later. So it's typically the midpoint. I do put a lot of power into the ripened client's hands as well, and say, like, please let me know if you're having troubles so that we can step in and try to navigate that with the student. And so far they've always been very responsive with that. So I think that that's been helpful because they're almost your co-instructor, right, through the majority of the class and the experience. So I think really giving them that power too, like, please let me know, please feel free to modify as you see the need arise.
Yeah, I'll add my 2 cents here too. And I think this is where the power of the instructor really comes into play, because as the instructor, you get a chance to really know your students and to know who are those students who are coming in without much experience, who are those students who have a lot of experience. And if you're able to configure teams that sort of help distribute that expertise with students who don't have it, that creates a really equitable way for students to get caught up, right? But also in terms of sourcing projects, like source a ton of projects, and that way students have opportunities to choose what project they might be comfortable working with. And you get a lot of different employer partners as well who might be more open to working and taking on students who doesn't have experience and teaching them the ropes. So that'll be my 2 points. Key takeaways, I have some here. I've had this up for a few minutes, so I hope everyone has had the chance to take a look at them from today. Understanding experiential learning is a toolbox filled with different varieties of tools that you can choose which ones you want to use. Starting small, like Ruben and Maureen had already talked about, and piloting maybe a project to begin with. Right-sizing and adapting the course to be able to accommodate a form of work integrated learning. Consider all the value propositions of the different forms of work integrated learning and their use cases and purposes. And finally, think about what institutional resources are available at your institution to help support you as well. I'll end here. If you have any more information, if you have any more questions and you want more information about Ripen, I noticed a lot of the questions were specifically about Ripen. We didn't really want to make the webinar just about Ripen. We wanted to make it about, best ways to help implement work integrated learning for educators who might be new at this. But if you do need support from Ripen, we'd be happy to get back to you and have a one-on-one conversation to provide that support and get to know what your ideas are. So you can take a photo of this or scan this, and that'll direct you to our email, in which we'll be able to book a time with you to chat about your implementation. So feel free to do that, but I'll end it here for Maureen and Ruben, just to give your final thoughts on best practices or your best words of wisdom and advice to educators out here.
The world is dynamic. It's moving very fast in many different ways. The more tools we give our students to go out there and experience the world, the better it is.
Agree, totally. I think it's just a really fun opportunity to connect with people that the students would never have an opportunity to do so. So the more chances we can give them to expand their horizons, I think the better.
Excellent. All right, let's end it there. Thank you so much, Maureen and Ruben, for joining us. And again, just sharing some of your experiences and best practices for everyone in the audience. And I want to take some time to thank everyone for joining us today and making time for this really critical webinar to fit in your schedule. So thank you, everyone. I hope this was valuable. And I hope you do reach out to us here at Ripon to support your implementation for work integrated learning. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great rest of the day.